Hello and welcome to the SCP podcast. The SCP is Society for Consulting Psychology. I'm your host today, Joanie Connell, and today we have an interesting topic. It's really like the real life of what it is for a consultant. And our guest, Dr. Mary Cianni, is the author of the book Consultant's Compass: Navigating Success with Courage, Curiosity, and Compassion. She's also a clinical associate professor in the Master's in Executive Coaching and Organizational Consulting program at New York University. And she has many years of consulting experience at Willis Towers Watson and Korn Ferry. Welcome, Mary.
Hello, Joanie. It's great to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
Well, thank you for joining us. I'm so looking forward to hearing some of your stories. I have to say, I read your book and the stories are incredible. So maybe we'll hear some today. And if we don't hear them all, people can read your book. But let's learn a little bit about you. I mean, I'm really curious. Like, what compelled you to write this book? How did you get to this point in your life to write it?
Yeah, well, at this point, I often say that my career has now come full circle. So I started out as an academic and I was teaching in a school of business at Susquehanna University. Had an independent consulting practice alongside that, as many academics do, and then decided that I was going to go into consulting full time. So that's where, as you mentioned, I spent over 20 years at Willis Towers Watson and Korn Ferry. And I was thinking about what next. An opportunity came up for me to teach organizational consulting. So, in some ways, it's like the perfect bow on a career of bringing together the teaching and the consulting. So, when I started 5 years ago to teach in this program, I started to bring in guest speakers, and the students really resonated with the stories. And I think, in a lot of ways, if you think about the learning process of becoming a consultant, it's easy to learn the methodologies, the phases, how to analyze the data. But that emotional experience of how do we really become a consultant? How do we
Mhm.
develop that consulting mindset? How do we build those relationships, manage all of the ups and downs of the consultant's life? It was harder to teach that in a way that was as simple as the scientific aspects and more about the art. So I decided to write a book about
Mhm.
it and tell my story, but also tell the story of 36 people, consultants that I admired, as part of learning from others as well.
Yeah, well, and it shows through, and that's very interesting that you say, the emotional side of consulting, because oh boy, is it. I mean, both, dealing with clients, but also, you know, when you walk out of the engagement and get the feedback or interact with others, or don't get the engagement after you've been working so hard to get it. So, some of those stories really resonated with me. I mean, I just want to emphasize how a great a storyteller you are, and wondering if there were, just a few, I mean, key points in the book that you really felt like you wanted to share with us today about, what it's really like for the consultant.
Yeah, it was interesting, Joni, as I kept reading the transcripts of the interviews over and over and over
Mhm.
again. One of the aspects that surprised me and really helped to frame the three sections of courage, curiosity, and
Mhm.
compassion was the compassion piece. And how many of my heroes talked about those times when they started to feel like maybe they couldn't cut it anymore.
Mm.
And it's not just something that happens to us early in our careers, but throughout, because we're, as you talked about, all of those different points of at the end of an engagement, we don't get the engagement. There's so many times, almost on a daily basis, that we're being evaluated and judged, and right,
Yeah.
and our self-esteem is like, am I good enough? Does the client like me? Am I getting along with my teammates? All of those things. So that compassion piece really surprised me, as I started to dig into the stories, and how many folks really talked about that. And I remember someone who, again, was one of my heroes, who said that he almost left the profession. He almost left the firm because he wasn't bringing in the big projects anymore. He wasn't getting that big win. And then lo and behold, a big project came forward. And as I think he said, I was back in the saddle again, but so all of that is something hard to put onto a PowerPoint slide in a classroom. But the stories, I think, really, really touched people.
Yeah, as I read the book, I really felt that I was in a room with a whole bunch of seasoned consultants who were sharing their stories with each other, and it reminded me. I think part of the point of the book too was that a lot of this you don't learn from texts on how to consult.
Mhm.
You learn models and you learn process and all that, but you don't really learn what it's like. And so I learned so much from my mentors,
Mhm.
and I just remember the early years of my consulting, being in a room and seeing one of them in particular just slam a book down on the table when he was told that he didn't that the client didn't like the presentation. And I was just so shocked because he, in my opinion, was like one of the heroes that you mentioned,
Yeah.
in your book, and I was like, "He's just so amazing. How could anyone?" I mean, first of all, how could he be so disappointed, you
Mhm.
know? But it still hit hard, and he got over it. I mean, it rolled off the next day, whatever, but, just seeing that, the reaction, it was really, I think, important to, calibrate what I was in for.
Yeah, yeah, and I think you're bringing up a good point about the mentors, the people that we look up to, and some of the folks in the book talked about not just the positive things that they learned, but
Mhm,
how they learned not to be. And again,
mhm,
one story was about someone who had learned from this guru in the field, but he realized that the clients wound up feeling alienated by him because he was such a good, a guru, and but he brought arrogance and hubris. And this consultant learned, that it really is about building those relationships, and it's not about
mhm.
us. It's not about how
Yeah,
smart we are, but it's how do we help our clients to look smart in the work
yeah.
that they're doing.
Yeah, no, I saw that come through too. I mean, um, listening and reacting and not just touting and telling and directing. Yeah.
Yeah,
One of your early stories I thought really highlighted that about even how you brought your uh, clinical background in to listen and summarize somebody's challenges, and they finally said that you heard them where nobody else would.
yeah. That was actually the beginning of my consulting
Yeah,
career.
yeah.
I was, got a call. I was working as an internal consultant in a learning and development, and got a call from the senior vice president saying to me, "Mary, you're a psychologist, right?" And I thought,
Mhm.
"Oh my gosh, where is this going to go? Like, what is he? Is he asking for therapy? Is he wants me to intervene with someone?" But because
Mhm.
so many of the consultants who had approached this vice president, who needed some help, came in with a solution. Right?
Mhm.
They had a preferred solution or methodology or something that they thought would work, and never stopped to take the time to listen, to really understand. And I tell my students a lot of times that when our clients present a problem to us, we have to really first start to say, is that really the problem? Right?
Mhm.
And really try and understand what it is that's going on with that client and with that organization.
Yeah, and that's actually, I mean, just a little plug for SCP here, Society of Consulting Psychology. I mean, I love, hanging around with other consulting psychologists, because, um, we all understand that process, I think. I mean, how we implement it is another thing, right? Like, being good at it takes time. Well, let me ask another question. We were sort of talking about, who is this book written for? Is this written for people who are thinking about consulting, people who are already consultants, or why would somebody really, want to pick it up? Aside,
I think there's several audiences.
yeah.
So I think first, if people are thinking about going into consulting,
Mm.
and that was
Mhm.
my primary motivation, was writing it for my students who are thinking about going
Mhm.
into the consulting world, because I think it helps to people to understand, am I a good fit, right? Because you have to learn how to deal with the ambiguity. It's not
Mhm.
like oftentimes in a corporate role where you have a set of roles and responsibilities and you kind of in that box of work that you're accountable for. In consulting, it's really about being a self starter. It's really about initiating, and there's a lot of fluidity to what that role can look like. So you have to be able to deal with ambiguity. You have to be able to deal with rejection, right? You have to be
Yeah.
able to deal with not having your calendar be yours anymore, but that your clients own it. So I think it's for that, but it can either be a lot of times people are doing a career shift, right? A career pivot. And
Mhm.
I think it applies for whether you're starting out as an undergraduate or graduate student or someone mid career. I also think it's helpful for people who are in the consulting world because one of the things that I took away as we talked about my heroes is there are times throughout your consulting life when you're feeling challenged, right? Because we're
Mhm.
always in the deep end of the pool. Every assignment is a new assignment. So I think it also helps to provide, in some ways, the comfort that I'm not the only one going
Mhm.
through these
Mhm.
experiences, but also here are some strategies for how to deal with it. Because
Mhm.
one of the things that we know, right, is that no matter how you manage on a what your year looks like, that every year you're starting out new, right? Your billable hours are back to zero. Your revenue generation is back to zero. You need to develop new consultants. So in some ways, we're always at the beginning in the consulting world.
Yeah. No, that's exactly what I was looking for an answer from you because, um I actually a lot of, younger or just maybe not younger, but even just transitioning, career people or anyone who's newer to consulting or in a program, they come to me and say, "I'm trying to decide what to do, if I should be internal or external consultant," trying to convey what the life is like. Now I have a resource. So thank you.
Good,
Right,
you're
because
welcome.
yeah, I mean, that is it. You wanna let people know that a fit is really important, and, there's, lots of different ways to apply, a degree or a background in consulting, either internally or externally, and I also did feel um that validation too, reading it as somebody who's, been in more experienced as well, and one of the things that comes up another thing that comes up for me is a lot of people talk about it can be isolating to be a consultant. I mean, I guess it's isolating in any field to some extent, especially if you're a leader, but if you're a consultant, particularly, in like a solo
Mhm.
or smaller firm, you don't have a team to commiserate with. So having a book as a resource is also a great idea, I think, to validate.
Well, I think the other piece of it is, Joni, is we're not often comfortable talking about those insecurities. So
Mhm.
sometimes as a consultant, we have the sense that we have to present this persona of being always being knowledgeable about everything, always being in control, because our clients want to see that, right? There's an image we have to
Mhm.
project
Mhm.
to create credibility and trust
Mhm.
and confidence from our clients. So sometimes it makes it hard to say, and I know I felt this several times throughout my career, like, I think I'm messing up. Like, I'm really feeling challenged right now. And one of the things I said to the people that I interviewed, because most of them were folks that I worked with, was why couldn't we have these conversations when we work together?
Mhm.
Why
Mhm.
couldn't we have that sense of vulnerability and trust that we could go to a colleague and say, hey, I feel like I'm not cutting it now. Like, I really need, can we talk about this? So I think it's
Mhm.
also that willingness to be vulnerable with one another as
Right.
consultants and to reach out. And as you mentioned with SCP, I mean, there is that sense of being able to have that network of folks who you can pick up the phone and call and say, hey, I need some help to figure this out.
Mhm. Yeah, and we even run peer consultation groups, which is exactly for that purpose, but there are people who, run these kind of groups outside of SCP as well, but having people I think that's a really good point of having people you trust you can be vulnerable with to talk about these things, get peer coaching.
Well, and the reality is, in today's environment, there's
Mhm.
so many challenges our clients are facing that nobody's faced before, right?
Oh
You think
my
about
gosh.
even just going back to the pandemic,
Mhm.
no one had experience dealing with a global pandemic, or now
Mhm.
with the introduction of AI and how that's really
Mhm.
transforming organizations. So
Mhm.
in some ways, we're all learning together. I mean, no one is really an expert on the future of work in some ways.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. No, that's I mean, how then again, I guess part of it too is staying up to date and current with new methods, new trends, et cetera, et cetera. How do you do that?
Yeah, and that was, I think, one of the other sections of the book was on
Mhm.
curiosity. And I think that's what often compels folks like us to go into consulting, is because there's always things to learn, right? We get bored with the routine. Now, sometimes it
Mhm.
can become overwhelming, but I think there is that sense of us being curious and having to stay up to date. Part of it I think is recognizing that we're not going to learn everything about, like, so what do we need to know about
Yeah.
AI, right?
I know.
What do we need to trying to put a ring to, because the
Mhm.
other thing we're good at as consultants is wanting to always dig a little bit deeper, right? So,
Mhm.
oh, this leads me into this area, let me learn a little bit about that. So in some
Mhm.
ways we need to put some self-control over that. And one of the people that I didn't interview for the book, but I spoke with about the section on curiosity, was Alison Hortzmeyer, who's an expert on consulting and curiosity in the profession. And she really said we have to put the guardrails on, like we have to think about, otherwise, what is it that we need to know, because it can become overwhelming.
Oh, absolutely. I think all of us would admit, hands up first, about rabbit holes we've been down, preparing or something, and all of a
Yeah.
sudden realizing we kind of missed the point. Got to
Yeah.
get back in,
Yeah.
and it's late at night. You're like, uh oh, I'm not going to be prepared if I don't actually stay on target here. Yeah, that's really funny. Guardrails, yeah, important. Self discipline. I mean, yeah, there's a lot, especially as a consultant. I mean, it's you have to um, really manage yourself well in a lot of different ways, even in the moment with the clients.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I'm sure you talk about, yeah, that's in the book too.
Right, right. And being
Mhm,
comfortable saying, I don't know, but we could figure this
mhm,
out together,
mhm,
which in my experience, those have been the most fun assignments when our client and I said, well, we haven't really faced with this before, but let's figure it out.
mhm,
Let's create something. Let's innovate.
mhm. Well, I mean, if there's like one takeaway or something that you would want people to have from our discussion, what do you think it would be in terms of thinking about getting your book?
Well, I think reading stories, right, is always
Mhm,
a way of helping to understand ourselves.
mhm,
And at the end of every chapter, I have some reflection
mhm,
questions that people can ask, or some action steps that people can take that relate to each of the chapters. So I think it's both a set of stories that can help to give us some ideas of how we can deal with these challenges, but it's also a little bit of a workbook to say, okay, let me take some time to reflect on what all of this means to me. What are the stories that resonate with me? So I almost see it as a desktop reference in some ways for a
mhm.
consultant when you're feeling stuck or you're feeling challenged, and maybe the emotional side, you need to kind of figure out what's going on. That some of these stories might help you in your own journey.
Oh, I'll keep it on my desktop. That's where it is right now. Uh, and pick it up next time. Yeah, I'm having one of those feelings. Well, how can people get it? How can people go out and get your book? I mean, where is it for sale? Yeah.
Probably the easiest way is to go to Amazon,
Mhm,
and it's the Consultant's Compass.
mhm.
And that's probably the best and easiest way, because it's in hard copy, Kindle version, and also on Audible.
Right, for people who don't wanna read or who want to,
Right.
put it on while they're driving or something like that, yeah. Okay, excellent. And what about reaching you? If people have follow-up questions or, I don't know, wanna invite you in to talk or something like that, how would they reach you?
Probably the best way is through LinkedIn, and I'll respond. And certainly happy if
Mhm.
anyone wants to talk more about the ideas in the book. Certainly more than happy to do that.
Great. Well, Mary Cianni, yeah, you can look her up on LinkedIn. It's real easy. And we'll have all that information in the show notes as well for the podcast. Well, this has been really interesting, Mary. Thank you so much for being here and telling us about your book.
It's my pleasure, and glad that you enjoyed reading it, Joni.
Oh, thanks. And thanks to all of our viewers and listeners. We're here at Society of Consulting Psychology. And we have lots of different episodes of the podcast, so stay tuned. We'll see you next time.